Let's talk about types of sentences. We'll do it by looking at this totally made up news story to begin getting an idea of how journalists write. The story's about a fire in Rule 104. Again, this didn't happen. I totally made this up. But it's roughly the length of the stories that you'll typically write in this class. The first four paragraphs illustrate four sentence structures, each increasingly complicated. You can use each of these structures as a template for the sentences that you'll be writing in this class. Here's a close-up look at the first sentence, the one that journalists typically call the lead of the story. The lead says, "Smoke from an electrical fire drove dozens of students and their professors out of a packed lecture hall on MTSU's campus Thursday afternoon." The lead happens to be an example of a simple sentence. That's the first type we'll look at. Simple sentences have one subject, one verb, and express one idea. Can you tell me what the verb is? Give you a second to find it. There it is. It's the word drove. And now what's the subject of the verb drove? And a hint, it's not the word fire. Got your guess? It's smoke. So why isn't fire the subject? Well, fire, along with from an electrical, is busy describing smoke. The whole phrase, from an electrical fire, is a modifier, and modifiers can't be subjects. Incidentally, a phrase is a group of words that express something in a sentence, but that lack both a subject and a verb. If the words include both a subject and a verb, then we call them a clause, not a phrase. Not that kind of clause. So what about packed? Isn't it a verb? If I packed something, that's an action, isn't it? Well, packed can indeed be a verb. As used here, though, packed is a modifier. It's describing lecture hall. That's an important principle to get. The same word can be a subject, verb, object, or modifier. It depends on how the word is being used in the sentence. Packing is a verb if you are packing a lecture hall. But it's a subject if packing a lecture hall is dangerous. And meanwhile, it's a modifier if you're using packing tape. And it's an object if a professor enjoys packing a lecture hall. Packing a lecture hall is what the professor enjoys. So when in doubt, use one of these simple sentences. They're short, they're clear, they're difficult to screw up. And in broadcast writing, when you can read them without your face turning blue, so that makes them pretty good choices. The second paragraph has two subject-verb pairs. What are they? Well, there's the first pair. Nobody suffered. Nobody's the subject. Suffered is the verb. And there's the second. Paramedics treated. Paramedics is the subject and treated is the verb. So this is an example of a compound sentence. A compound sentence consists of two or more clauses. Remember, clauses are groups of words that contain both a subject and a verb. And in the case of a compound sentence, both of those clauses are independent. Now, what does that mean? An independent clause has a subject and verb, which is what makes it a clause, not a phrase, by the way, the subject and verb part. And also, it forms a complete self-contained statement. That's what makes it independent. Nobody suffered serious injury. See how that's a complete standalone statement. And so is paramedics treated 8 students for eye and throat irritation, scrapes, and bruises. In the next paragraph, which I'll show you in a second, we'll contrast these with a dependent clause, which has a subject and a verb, but can't stand by itself the way these two statements can. So reach for one of these compound sentences when you need to express two equally important ideas in the same sentence. For example, the goal in this sentence is to contrast the absence of serious injuries with the presence of minor ones. To make a compound sentence work, though, you have to connect the independent clause with a conjunction, a semicolon, or a conjunctive adverb. Conjunctions include words like but, which is the one used here, and words like and, or, nor, for, and yet. Also, always put a comma before the conjunction. You see it right there. This is the most common way to form a compound sentence. Just two independent clauses joined by a conjunction and preceded with the conjunction preceded with a comma. But you can also use a semicolon, although it's not done often in news copy. It's kind of unwieldy and looks sort of weird in print. But here's an example of what it would look like. See the semicolon there between incident and paramedics. There's no conjunction here, no and, no but, no or, no for, no yet, just a semicolon. Conjunctive adverbs are words like however, therefore, consequently, and so forth when they're used to connect clauses in a compound sentence. Here's what that looks like. Now, these are rare in news copy too, but if you do use one, don't forget the semicolon before the conjunctive adverb and the comma after the conjunctive adverb. The third paragraph also has two subject-verb pairs. Can you find them? There's the first one, class began, and the second, projector began. Now, two subject-verb pairs means there are also two clauses. What are the two clauses? There's the first one. Shortly after the class began at 2:40 p.m. in room 104 of the Brass Mag Communication Building. And here's the second one. A digital projector mounted on the ceiling in the back of the room began belching thick, black, acrid smoke. Now, that first clause is different, though. It reads like a one-sentence cliffhanger. It leaves you wondering, well, what's next? It doesn't form a complete standalone thought. Listen to it again. Shortly after the class began at 2:40 p.m. in room 104 of the Brass Mag Communication Building. What? See how it leaves you asking, well, what's next? That's the hallmark of a dependent clause. Its ability to make sense depends on other things in the sentence that are not in the clause itself. The other clause here is independent. Now, when you mix one dependent clause and one independent clause, then you've written a complex sentence. Now, you want to use this type of sentence when you need to include two ideas in the same sentence, but you need to emphasize one idea over the other. Here, the most interesting idea is the one about the projector belching smoke, so I made that one the independent clause. But the dependent clause adds important information about when and where the smoke belching happened. Let's play find the subject-verb pairs again, this time with the next paragraph. Now, there are three this time. Can you find them? There's the first pair, and there's the second, and finally the third. So we have three clauses this time. There's the first clause, as the smoke began filling the room. Here's the second clause, instructor Ken Blake pulled a fire alarm. And the third clause, the more than 70 students scrambled over desks and chairs to reach the back wall's two exits. Again, though, one of them is dependent. Can you find it? Which one doesn't form a complete standalone thought? It's that first one. As the smoke began filling the room, ... Hear the cliffhanger? Yeah, that's the dependent clause. It's that first one. Essentially, we have a compound sentence with a dependent clause thrown into the mix. This type of sentence is a compound complex sentence. Now, you might want to avoid these, okay? Unless you really know what you're doing. All of these sentence types are important to kind of vary the tone and pacing of your writing, but 9 times out of 10 you want to reach for one of those just simple sentences. This one is easy to mess up if you're not careful. Also, the complexity of these sentences, they're long, they're convoluted, they're difficult for readers to digest as well. So the story's fifth paragraph illustrates an interesting trick for packing a simple sentence with information, but keeping that sentence short and easy to understand. There's only one subject. Where's the subject here? There it is, cruise. So crews are going to do all the things that are going to be listed here. But there are three verbs, and here are the three verbs. Can you find them? There's arrived, extinguished, and evacuated. Crews did all those things. The crews arrived, then the crews extinguished, and then the crews evacuated. So notice how all three verbs have the same form. They're all regular past tense. Writers call this parallel structure, and it can help readers navigate what otherwise would be a difficult sentence to understand. See how arrived, extinguished, and evacuated kind of act like little signposts that guide the reader through the sentence. The first sentence of the story's last paragraph uses another tactic for fitting extra information into a simple sentence. It's an appositive. Do you happen to know which words make up the appositive? Can you find it? There it is, Dean of the College of Media and Entertainment. An appositive describes a person, place, or thing. It is placed directly after. Here, the appositive describes Beverly Keel. It tells you who she is. It tells you she is the college's dean. Thing about an appositive is it's always set off by commas. You can see here the comma after Keel and the comma after entertainment, the last word in the appositive phrase. So these appositives are another way that you can pack a lot of extra information and details into a sentence that is still pretty easy to read and understand.